Welcome to Just Relationships, the show that offers you concrete ways to make your relationships better. Whether it's your boss, your spouse, your children, or your friends, the quality of your relationships in life directly affects how you feel about yourself and the success you achieve. Your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer, a psychotherapist, telecoach, author, and seminar leader, will interview top experts to help you learn to manage this essential part of your life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer.
Greetings to you. I am absolutely thrilled to introduce you to my guest today, Steve Andrew, who is the co-author of the book Game Plan, A Man's Guide to Achieving Emotional Fitness. She said Game Plan, A Man's Guide to Achieving Emotional Fitness. And I want everyone to know that I am interviewing this fellow Steve Andrew, who has had an enormously positive influence on my life. And I'm going to actually invite you to say hello right now, because I want to tell people about how I know you and the nature of our relationship and what you did that changed my life, okay? So hello.
Hello, and welcome, man. This is so beautiful to even just be in touch with you this way.
Oh, thank you, Stephen. So what I want people to know is that Stephen co-founded a camp for adults called Recovery Camp, and it was for people in recovery or people who wanted to recover or be in recovery, and the whole idea of the 12-step movement, Alcoholics Anonymous, and all of the other 12-step programs that followed suit with the model of AA, Al-Anon, and Overeaters Anonymous, and Narcotics Anonymous, and Gamblers Anonymous, and you name it. And after a few years of great success in Recovery Camp, the camp decided to expand its circle of influence, sphere of influence, to all people who wanted to be on the growing edge of their lives. So the camp was renamed to Kindred Spirits Camp. And I went to Kindred Spirits Camp, Stephen, 1995. Okay, 1995, and I know you started the camp, was it 92, or do you remember the year?
Well, actually, I started in, the first time I sat was Liberation Camp in 1979.
Yeah.
I did the Liberation Camp for a few years, which was a family camp. And then I decided that it was time for people who want to be on that growing edge in that recovery movement to take the chance to put all of that together. What a remarkable journey it's been, and I'm glad, Duffy, you are on it.
Well, thank you, and I've been a staff member now for, oh my goodness, almost 20 years, and and what happened with, and I just want people to know, it's Kindred Spirits is at the Rowe Conference Center, and it is in Rowe, Massachusetts, which is the northern Berkshires, and they meet every August for 1 week, and there's a women's camp, and there are kids camps, and all of that. It's a general camp and conference center. So if you're interested in joining us in the summertime or during the year for the weekend seminars, you're more than welcome. Rowe, ROWE, Camp and Conference Center. And just for people to know that people kind of just fell in love with each other during the camp and didn't want to wait a whole year to see each other. So we have gatherings, and people will host a gathering, and people will drive a couple of hours to see their friends, and so we have regular gatherings, and it's a wonderful, wonderful community. And Stephen, I just want to say publicly again, I can't thank you enough for having created this beautiful entity that so many people can plug into and find their more authentic selves.
there's the first sentence I wrote about the camp was, imagine the chance of falling in love with 80 people.
Yeah. Yeah, and you think it's weird and it's ridiculous, and but building conscious community is such a wonderful thing through brilliant seminars and singing and dancing, and it's just a wondrous experience. And it is not for profit, so it's like a real jewel and a gem that a lot of people don't know about. And just I want you, my dear listeners, to know about it. And so now I have the excuse, Steve Andrew, to interview you on Just Relationships, because you have just co-written a book, a game plan, A Man's Guide to Achieving Emotional Fitness. And what is there especially about men that it would be a book just for men to achieve emotional fitness?
Well, there's a journey, Duffy, that men go on as boys, and then as young men, and then later as men. And a lot of it is called Act Like a Man. Mm. And it really is about not going towards any kind of vulnerability. Mm. And if you do go towards any kind of vulnerability, then there's very likely to be people that will shame you. And then so you learn how to act in a certain way, which is to have a lot of strength, to not be very vulnerable, to hold back your feelings with the exception of irritation and anger. Mm. And so you then take that box, if you will, that acting like a man box, and you go into this life. And then you have a relationship with somebody who is very different than that, who's vulnerable, who wants vulnerability, who wants connection. And you can feel the conflict that comes in a general, rich conversation with each other, that they're coming at it from two different perspectives, and how hard that is.
Wow.
And how difficult that is. And men are suffering.
Yes.
In the last 3 years, the increase of suicides among men in their 50s and 60s have gone up 30%. Oh. Men are sitting incarcerated in jail. 93% of them are prisoners or men. The list goes on and on in terms of a young man is more likely to commit suicide between the ages of 17 and 24 than a young woman. 10 times more likely. Right now, full scholarships, 85% of going towards women and less men. That's not to say that women don't deserve it or anything else. It's just this toxic, strength-based. You've got to be strong. You've got to compete, and you can't really have a lot of empathy. That is destroying the gender and the beauty of the male heart.
Destroying the beauty of the male heart. Yes, so true. And when you say, Stephen, you just put it so succinctly and so simply, in the best sense of the word, that boys and men have been taught systematically to shut down their vulnerability, to put themselves in this box and only allow the feeling of anger, irritability out. And women want vulnerability, and therein lies the conflict. And as a psychotherapist, I work with individuals and couples, and it's really the essence of the problem with couples.
It's such a powerful problem that they end up sort of in these right positions. That one says, I don't get why you won't be vulnerable. And the other one says, I don't get why you're asking me to be vulnerable. And you don't, and it's almost coming automatically out of their mouths because, there was a systematic oppression.
Yes.
That consistently, ongoingly continued to happen. And there's so many pieces of evidence to that systematic oppression. And what happens, is just remarkable. There's 5 years in a young man's life between the ages of 10 and 15 in which he walks through a gauntlet of cruelty. And in that gauntlet of cruelty, if he shows any kind of vulnerability, he's shamed so that he gets back into the box. And if he's way in the box for any reason, then what happens is that they bully him to show others how they're to behave. It's just remarkable how consistently this is.
Wow. That's between 10 and 15, this gauntlet of cruelty and the shame for showing any kind of human vulnerability, and this belief that vulnerability is weakness, when you and I know, and if you take any time to think about it, it really takes a lot of strength to be vulnerable.
Well, actually, vulnerability is where growth is, where you were talking about emotional fitness. Vulnerability is in that process of emotional fitness. It's where we grow emotionally, and where we grow spiritually, and where we grow relationally. And this is such a spiritual process to get to the place where you're 23, 24 years old, and you start to realize you have no purpose and you really can't connect well. And so you look to women to connect, and you realize that they want something that you don't even understand because you've been so shamed around your vulnerability. So now you feel even more inadequate. And the one place where you could go and get some help, would be with other men. And you don't, because that is the people who injured you.
Right.
So that is where the oppression is. And so you don't go to the oppressor.
Right.
It's women, don't need to be going to men to understand their womanhood. But men cannot go to other men.
Right.
They can have them as friends on a sort of superficial level. But as they grow in their 20s, they start to actually peel off friends. They don't become very rich anymore. So now they get into a treadmill. And that treadmill is success.
Yeah.
And they focus on being successful and achieving more and more and more. And all the while, the things around them are suffering in terms of connectedness and vulnerability.
And they're suffering, and the things around them are suffering, and it's such a vicious cycle, right, Stephen? And I am thinking that women are more comfortable talking to women, and men are more comfortable talking to women, and the nature of men's groups is where I have witnessed so much growth in men. And my own husband, him going to a men's group totally transformed him, and he loves men's groups, and there's nothing like two men or a larger group of men actually taking off those sports personas and just talking about ball games and going beneath to their real feelings, which can be hurt. The injury, the hurt, and the anger that comes with the hurt, and the profound sadness of loss of human connection. And I know that
and you sort of spoke to it so well, that if they can find a circle of what I call emotional pallbearers, these compassionate witnesses of other men. And so at the present time, I sit with 6 men's groups a week, over 55 men who come weekly. to find that kind of level of empathy, compassion, and vulnerability. And it's the power of that vulnerability. It's the power of thinking through the eyes of empathy, so that if they're going to be in relationship with women, if they're going to be in relationship with another person, what they're going to do is to have their first thought be empathy. Their first thought be compassionate. And what happens is that that's taken away because that is a vulnerable thought. That is a compassion that automatically demands vulnerability. Instead, what we have is ruthless violence.
So rage, yeah, and the difference between anger and rage, and you have John Lee, who wrote a foreword to your book, and he writes so brilliantly on anger and versus rage. So the ruthless rage and aggression, and I just want to point out that if we are, as you say, systematically oppressed in our feelings, and we cannot have self-attachment, we cannot have feelings for ourselves, self-compassion, there's no way we can have feelings, empathy, and compassion for others, especially our intimate partners, if we're heterosexual female partners. And this is what women want. How often do women say, don't try to fix my problem, just feel with me and just be a confidant and help me, show me that you care, that I hurt. And we can definitely brainstorm, but no, it's not about fixing me. It's about feeling with me.
Well, and feeling with me, Duffy, is definitely what's called empathy.
Yes.
And empathy is the antidote to shame. And the only way through people's struggles and their suffering is empathy. And for men, empathy is vulnerability. And vulnerability is the opposite of what they've been trained.
Yes.
And so what they end up doing is trying to fix, or then avoiding. They avoid, or they sympathize, or they try to get out of the conversation quickly, or they try to fix it. And any one of those strategies systematically destroys the relationship.
Wow. So empathy is the antidote to shame, and empathy requires vulnerability, which is so hard for men. Boys and men, they are systematically taught not to have those feelings, self-feelings, and therefore they would go to avoidance or sympathy or try to fix it. So tell us the difference between sympathy and empathy.
Well, sympathy is to say, I feel sorry for you.
Yeah. Pitiful.
So there's a sympathy there.
Right.
Empathy is to say, you're hurting.
Yeah.
In other words, one is I, and I've invaded myself with I, and we do this to people particularly when we're dealing with loss and death, and that we kind of walk up to people and say, "I'm so sorry." What people, that's sympathy, and that's fine. But the truth is, what people want or yearn for is some compassion, and compassion is the ability to sit with the suffering.
Right.
And that means, tell me what it's like for you to say goodbye to your father. And then respond in a kind of empathetic way with that welcoming. And empathy is that kind of vulnerability, I'm going to sit with your suffering. And we've lost it in management. Our companies have lost it. Our way of managing people has lost it. We haven't figured out then compassion and empathy is our way out of our struggles. And what we've done is stolen them from men. And we put them in leadership positions. And then we have most of what we're doing go awry.
Of course, because if these leaders are empty, they are boxes, they are hollow boxes, how can they lead with integrity, with true values, compassionate, humane values, and integrity, and all of that?
Well, the problem is they believe they are integrity. They believe wholeheartedly that they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
But most of it is cognitive, and it's not emotional, because the emotionality was systematically and taken away so that they don't know that they're not emotional or vulnerable. They believe they're in their integrity. And they can't. And so what happens is that we don't have a culture that cares for all of us. It starts to isolate. And when it isolates, it gets into individuality. And it says individuality is the most important thing. When in fact, what's the most important thing is family, couples, community. That is, it's when you let go into the vulnerability and the suffering of another human being that there's no greater, kinder act. But men are actually taught not to do it. I love to tell the story of a soccer game in two fields. And one is boys playing soccer, a high school group of boys playing soccer. And another field is a group of girls, young women playing soccer in another field. And there's a person observing the issue of empathy. And what the observation notices is that when the girl is injured on the field, all of the girls stop until the girl is in a better shape. They stop the game. They care about whether she's okay. On the same field, the same age group, a boy gets injured. The observer notices that everybody looks back at the injury and does a quick assessment and continues the competition of the game.
Oh. Wow.
Until they're told by a referee to stop.
Wow. They have to be told by the referee to stop. The outside
structure. And what is different about this is that they both recognize that there's an injury.
Right.
But one believes that the objective of the game and the competition is more important than the injury.
Right.
That is what the boys are thinking at the time.
Yes.
They're encouraged to think that. They're yelled at if they stopped.
Right. Unless they're...
girls, the young women in the same game stop without being told.
Right. So they'd better not stop, but it's okay to stop if they are told to stop by a male authority. Exactly.
Because empathy is lost in competition.
Right.
And so what happens is you get into a company and now you drive yourself for success. And you drive yourself and you do more business and you will just turn and provide and perform and protect your family. You provide, you perform, you protect your family, but you have no emotional connection to them.
Yeah.
You provide, you perform, and you protect. And that becomes who you are. Until you hit a particular pause in your life, which I refer to as male pause. It's often sort of tragically called middle age. Actually, a time when men pause and they go on to the second half of their lives and they say, I don't want success, I want significance. So somewhere in their late 40s and early 50s, they pause. And they sort of say, I don't like what I'm doing. Now, some are caught on the treadmill because there's too much riches, too many money, too much power, too much control for them to even do anything about it.
Golden handcuffs.
On that treadmill. But others pause. They sometimes get ill. They sometimes get divorces. They sometimes find some young woman to have a relationship with so that they can have back their youth. But all of it is about, this is not okay. What happened? What they're trying to do is to find a way to feel emotional, spiritually.
Find a way to feel emotionally, spiritually, and to reclaim their humanness.
That male heart.
Yes, the male heart. So, Steve Andrew, co-author of Game Plan, A Man's Guide to Achieving Emotional Fitness. And I assume that we can get this book anywhere.
It's hanging out on Amazon.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it's a men's self-help book, and so it's not overly sold, but you certainly can get it there.
Okay, Amazon.com, Game Plan, A Man's Guide to Achieving Emotional Fitness. And we have to close for this show, and I want everyone to know that Steve Andrew is coming back next week for part 2 of this series on male emotional fitness, and that it is very, very, very possible. And we'll be looking more at the idea of empathy is the antidote to shame. Thank you so much, Steve Andrew. And this is, yes, thank you. And this is Dr. Duffy Spencer saying goodbye for now, wishing you great relationships.